The Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August 1949. The Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August 1949-0173/00205.2010 10,000 I commission. The International Committee of the Red Cross (IC) is an impartial, neutral and independent organization whose exclusively humanitarian mission is to protect the lives and dignity of victims of armed conflict and other situations of violence and to provide them with assistance. The IC also endeavors to prevent suffering by promoting and strengthening humanitarian law and universal humanitarian principles. Established in 1863, the IC is at the origin of the Geneva Conventions and the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. It directs and coordinates the international activities conducted by the movement in armed conflicts and other situations of violence. The Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August 1949. The Geneva Conventions of 1949. The Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August 1949. The Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August 1949-0173/00205.2010 10,000 I commission. The International Committee of the Red Cross (IC) is an impartial, neutral and independent organization whose exclusively humanitarian mission is to protect the lives and dignity of victims of armed conflict and other situations of violence and to provide them with assistance. The IC also endeavors to prevent suffering by promoting and strengthening humanitarian law and universal humanitarian principles. Established in 1863, the IC is at the origin of the Geneva Conventions and the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. It directs and coordinates the international activities conducted by the movement in armed conflicts and other situations of violence. The Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August 1949. The Geneva Conventions of 1949. 1. Contents. Preliminary remarks. Group of symbols. 19. Geneva Convention for the amelioration of the condition of the wounded and sick in armed forces in the field of the 12th of August 1949. Chapter I. General provisions. Group of symbols. 35. Article 1. Respect for the Convention. Group of symbols. 35. Article 2. Application of the Convention. Group of symbols. 35. Article 3. Conflicts not of an international character. Group of symbols. 35. Article 4. Application by neutral powers. Group of symbols. 36. Article 5. Duration of application. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 36. Article 6. Special agreements. Group of symbols. 36. Article 7. Non-renunciation of rights. Group of symbols. 37. Article 8. Protecting powers. Group of symbols. 37. Article 9. Activities of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Group of symbols. 37. Article 10. Substitutes for protecting powers. Group of symbols. 37. Article 11. Conciliation procedure. Group of symbols. 38. Chapter 2. Wounded and sick. Group of symbols. 39. Article 12. Protection and care. Group of symbols. 39. Article 13. Protected persons. Group of symbols. 39. Article 14. Status. Group of symbols. 40. Article 15. Search for casualties. Evacuation. Group of symbols. 40. Article 16. Recording and forwarding of information. Group of symbols. 40. Article 17. Prescriptions regarding the dead. Graves Registration Service. Group of symbols. 41. Article 18. Role of the population. Group of symbols. 42. Chapter 3. Medical units and establishments. Group of symbols. 42. Article 19. Protection. Group of symbols. 42. Article 20. Protection of hospital ships. Group of symbols. 42. Article 21. Discontinuance of protection of medical establishments and units. Group of symbols. 43. Article 22. Conditions not depriving medical units and establishments of protection. Group of symbols. 43. Article 23. Hospital zones and localities. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 43. 2. Contents. Chapter IV. Personnel. Group of symbols. 44. Article 24. Protection of permanent personnel. Group of symbols. 44. Article 25. Protection of auxiliary personnel. Group of symbols. 44. Article 26. Personnel of aid societies, group of symbols. 44 Article 27 Societies of neutral countries, group of symbols. 44 Article 28 Retained personnel, group of symbols. 45 Article 29 Status of auxiliary personnel, group of symbols. 46 Article 30 Return of medical and religious personnel, group of symbols. Group of symbols. 46 Article 31 Selection of personnel for return, group of symbols. 46 Article 32 Return of personnel belonging to neutral countries, group of symbols. 46 Chapter V Buildings and material, group of symbols. 47 Article 33 Buildings and stores, group of symbols. 47 Article 34 Property of aid societies, group of symbols. 47 Chapter 6 Medical transports, group of symbols. 47 Article 35 Protection, group of symbols. 47 Article 36 Medical aircraft, group of symbols. Group of symbols. 48 Article 37 Flight over neutral countries, landing of wounded, group of symbols. 48 Chapter 7 The distinctive emblem, group of symbols. 49 Article 38 Emblem of the Convention, group of symbols. 49 Article 39 Use of the emblem, group of symbols. 49 Article 40 Identification of medical and religious personnel, group of symbols. 49 Article 41 Identification of auxiliary personnel, group of symbols. 50 Article 42 Marking of medical units and establishments, group of symbols. 50 Article 43 Marking of units of neutral countries, group of symbols. 50 Article 44 Restrictions in the use of the emblem, exceptions, group of symbols. 50 Chapter 8 Execution of the Convention, group of symbols. 51 Article 45 Detailed execution, unforeseen cases, group of symbols. 51 Article 46 Prohibition of reprisals, group of symbols. 51 Article 47 Dissemination of the Convention, group of symbols. 51 Article 48 Translations, rules of application, group of symbols. 52 The Geneva Conventions of 1949. 3 Chapter 9 Repression of abuses and infractions, group of symbols. 52 Article 49 Penal sanctions, I General observations, group of symbols. 52 Article 52 Grave breaches, group of symbols. 52 Article 51 3 Responsibilities of the contracting parties, group of symbols. 53 Article 52 Inquiry procedure, group of symbols. 53 Article 53 Misuse of the emblem, group of symbols. 53 Article 54 Prevention of misuse, group of symbols. 54 Final provisions, group of symbols. 54 Article 55 Languages, group of symbols. 54 Article 56 Signature, group of symbols. 54 Article 57 Ratification, group of symbols. 54 Article 58 Coming into force, group of symbols. Group of symbols. 54 Article 59 Relation to previous conventions, group of symbols. 54 Article 60 Accession, group of symbols. 55 Article 61 Notification of accessions, group of symbols. 55 Article 62 Immediate effect, group of symbols. 55 Article 63 Denunciation, group of symbols. 55 Article 64 Registration with the United Nations, group of symbols. 55 Annex I Draft Agreement relating to hospital zones and localities, group of symbols. Group of symbols. 57 Annex II Identity Card for members of medical and religious personnel attached to the armed forces, group of symbols. 64 Contents Geneva Convention for the amelioration of the condition of wounded, sick and shipwrecked members of armed forces at sea of the 12th of August 1949. Chapter I General Provisions, group of symbols. 61 Article 1 Respect for the Convention, group of symbols. 61 Article 2 Application of the Convention, group of symbols. 61 Article 3 Conflicts not of an international character, group of symbols. 61 Article 4 Field of Application, group of symbols. 62 Article 5 Application by neutral powers, group of symbols. 62 Article 6 Special Agreements, group of symbols. 62 Article 7 Non-renunciation of rights, group of symbols. 63 Article 8 Protecting powers, Group of symbols. 63. Article 9. Activities of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Group of symbols. 63. Article 10. Substitutes for protecting powers. Group of symbols. 64. Article 11. Conciliation procedure. Group of symbols. 64. Chapter 2. Wounded, sick and shipwrecked. Group of symbols. 65. Article 12. Protection and care. Group of symbols. 65. Article 13. Protected persons. Group of symbols. 65. Article 14. Handing over to a belligerent. Group of symbols. 66. Article 15. Wounded taken on board a neutral warship. Group of symbols. 66. Article 16. Wounded falling into enemy hands. Group of symbols. 66. Article 17. Wounded landed in a neutral port. Group of symbols. 67. Article 18. Search for casualties after an engagement. Group of symbols. 67. Article 19. Recording and forwarding of information. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 67. Article 20. Prescriptions regarding the dead. Group of symbols. 68. Article 21. Appeals to neutral vessels. Group of symbols. 68. Chapter 3. Hospital ships. Group of symbols. 68. Article 22. Notification and protection of military hospital ships. Group of symbols. 68. Article 23. Protection of medical establishments ashore. Group of symbols. 69. Article 24. Hospital ships utilized by relief societies and private individuals of parties to the conflict. Group of symbols. 69. Article 25. 2. Neutral countries. Group of symbols. 69. Article 26. Tonnage. Group of symbols. 69. Article 27. Coastal rescue craft. Group of symbols. 69. Article 28. Protection of sick bays. Group of symbols. 70. Article 29. Hospital ships in occupied ports. Group of symbols. 70. Article 30. Employment of hospital ships and small craft. Group of symbols. 70. The Geneva Conventions of 1949. 5 Article 31. Right of control and search. Group of symbols. 70. Article 32. Stay in a neutral port. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 71. Article 33. Converted merchant vessels. Group of symbols. 71. Article 34. Discontinuance of protection. Group of symbols. 71. Article 35. Conditions not depriving hospital ships of protection. Group of symbols. 71. Chapter IV. Personnel. Group of symbols. 72. Article 36. Protection of the personnel of hospital ships. Group of symbols. 72. Article 37. Medical and religious personnel of other ships. Group of symbols. 72. Chapter VE. Medical transports. Group of symbols. 72. Article 38. Ships used for the conveyance of medical equipment. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 72. Article 39. Medical aircraft. Group of symbols. 73. Article 40. Flight over neutral countries. Landing of wounded. Group of symbols. 73. Chapter 6. The distinctive emblem. Group of symbols. 74. Article 41. Use of the emblem. Group of symbols. 74. Article 42. Identification of medical and religious personnel. Group of symbols. 74. Article 43. Marking of hospital ships and small craft. Group of symbols. 74. Article 44. Limitation in the use of markings. Group of symbols. 75. Article 45. Prevention of misuse. Group of symbols. 75. Chapter 7. Execution of the Convention. Group of symbols. 76. Article 46. Detailed execution. Unforeseen cases. Group of symbols. 76. Article 47. Prohibition of reprisals. Group of symbols. 76. Article 48. Dissemination of the Convention. Group of symbols. 76. Article 49. Translations. Rules of application. Group of symbols. 76. Chapter 8. Repression of abuses and infractions. Group of symbols. 76. Article 50. Penal sanctions. General observations. Group of symbols. 76. Article 51(2). Grave breaches. Group of symbols. 77. Article 52(3). Responsibilities of the contracting parties. Group of symbols. 77. Article 53. Inquiry procedure. Group of symbols. 77. Final provisions. Group of symbols. 77. Article 54. Languages. Group of symbols. 77. Article 55. Signature. Group of symbols. 77. Article 56. Ratification. Group of symbols. 78. Article 57. Coming into force. Group of symbols. 78. 6. Contents. Article 58. Relation to the 1907 Convention. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 78. Article 59. Accession. Group of symbols. 78. Article 60. Notification of accessions. Group of symbols. 78. Article 61. Immediate effect. Group of symbols. 79. Article 62. Denunciation. Group of symbols. 79. Article 63. Registration with the United Nations. Group of symbols. 79. Annex identity card for members of medical and religious personnel attached to the armed forces at sea. Group of symbols. 80. The Geneva Conventions of 1949. 7. Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war of the 12th of August 1949. Part I. General provisions. Group of symbols. 81. Article 1. Respect for the Convention. Group of symbols. 81. Article 2. Application of the Convention. Group of symbols. 81. Article 3. Conflicts not of an international character. Group of symbols. 81. Article 4. Prisoners of war. Group of symbols. 82. Article 5. Beginning and end of application. Group of symbols. 84. Article 6. Special agreements. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 84. Article 7. Non-renunciation of rights. Group of symbols. 84. Article 8. Protecting powers. Group of symbols. 84. Article 9. Activities of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Group of symbols. 85. Article 10. Substitutes for protecting powers. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 85. Article 11. Conciliation procedure. Group of symbols. 86. Part 2. General protection of prisoners of war. Group of symbols. 86. Article 12. Responsibility for the treatment of prisoners. Group of symbols. 86. Article 13. Humane treatment of prisoners. Group of symbols. 87. Article 14. Respect for the person of prisoners. Group of symbols. 87. Article 15. Maintenance of prisoners. Group of symbols. 87. Article 16. Equality of treatment. Group of symbols. 87. Part 3. Captivity. Group of symbols. 88. Section I. Beginning of captivity. Group of symbols. 88. Article 17. Questioning of prisoners. Group of symbols. 88. Article 18. Property of prisoners. Group of symbols. 88. Article 19. Evacuation of prisoners. Group of symbols. 89. Article 20. Conditions of evacuation. Group of symbols. 89. Section 2. Internment of prisoners of war. Group of symbols. 90. Chapter I. General observations. Group of symbols. 90. Article 21. Restriction of liberty of movement. Group of symbols. 90. Article 22. Places and conditions of internment. Group of symbols. 90. Article 23. Security of prisoners. Group of symbols. 91. Article 24. Permanent transit camps. Group of symbols. 91. Chapter 2. Quarters. Food and clothing of prisoners of war. Group of symbols. 91. Article 25. Quarters. Group of symbols. 91. Article 26. Food. Group of symbols. 92. 8. Contents. Article 27. Clothing. Group of symbols. 92. Article 28. Canteens. Group of symbols. 92. Chapter 3. Hygiene and medical attention. Group of symbols. 93. Article 29. Hygiene. Group of symbols. 93. Article 30. Medical attention. Group of symbols. 93. Article 31. Medical inspections. Group of symbols. 94. Article 32. Prisoners engaged on medical duties. Group of symbols. 94. Chapter IV. Medical personnel and chaplains retained to assist prisoners of war. Group of symbols. 94. Article 33. Rights and privileges of retained personnel. Group of symbols. 94. Chapter V. Religious Intellectual and physical activities, group of symbols. 95 Article 34 Religious duties, group of symbols. 95 Article 35 Retained chaplains, group of symbols. 95 Article 36 Prisoners who are ministers of religion, group of symbols. 96 Article 37 Prisoners without a minister of their religion, group of symbols. 96 Article 38 Recreation, study, sports and games, group of symbols. 96 Chapter 6, Discipline, group of symbols. 97 Article 39 Administration, saluting, group of symbols. 97 Article 40 Badges and decorations, group of symbols. 97 Article 41 Posting of the Convention and of regulations and orders concerning prisoners, group of symbols. 97 Article 42 Use of weapons, group of symbols. 97 Chapter 7, Rank of prisoners of war, group of symbols. 98 Article 43 Notification of ranks, group of symbols. 98 Article 44 Treatment of officers, group of symbols. 98 Article 45 Treatment of other prisoners, group of symbols. 98 Chapter 8, Transfer of prisoners of war after their arrival in camp, group of symbols. 98 Article 46 Conditions, group of symbols. 98 Article 47 Circumstances precluding transfer, group of symbols. 99 Article 48 Procedure for transfer, group of symbols. 99 Section 3, Labor of prisoners of war, group of symbols. 100 Article 49 General observations, group of symbols. 100 Article 50 Authorized work, group of symbols. 100 Article 51 Working conditions, group of symbols. 100 Article 52 Dangerous or humiliating labor, group of symbols. 101 Article 53 Duration of labor, group of symbols. 101 Article 54 Working pay, occupational accidents and diseases, group of symbols. 101 Article 55 Medical supervision, group of symbols. 102 Article 56 Labor detachments, group of symbols. 102 Article 57 Prisoners working for private employers, group of symbols. 102 The Geneva Conventions of 1949 9 Section IV, Financial resources of prisoners of war, group of symbols. 102 Article 58 Ready money, group of symbols. 102 Article 59 Amounts in cash taken from prisoners, group of symbols. 103 Article 60 Advances of pay, group of symbols. 103 Article 61 Supplementary pay, group of symbols. 104 Article 62 Working pay, group of symbols. 104 Article 63 Transfer of funds, group of symbols. 104 Article 64 Prisoners' accounts, group of symbols. 105 Article 65 Management of prisoners' accounts, group of symbols. 105 Article 66 Winding up of accounts, group of symbols. 106 Article 67 Adjustments between parties to the conflict, group of symbols. 106 Article 68 Claims for compensation, group of symbols. 106 Section V, Relations of prisoners of war with the exterior. 107 Article 69 Notification of measures taken, group of symbols. 107 Article 70 Capture card, group of symbols. 107 Article 71 Correspondence, group of symbols. 107 Article 72 Relief shipments, General principles, group of symbols. 108 Article 73 2, Collective relief, group of symbols. 108 Article 74 Exemption from postal and transport charges, group of symbols. 109 Article 75 Special means of transport, group of symbols. 109 Article 76 Censorship and examination, group of symbols. 110 Article 77 Preparation, execution and transmission of legal documents, group of symbols. 110 Section 6, Relations between prisoners of war and the authorities, group of symbols. 111 Chapter I, Complaints of prisoners of war respecting the conditions of captivity, group of symbols. 111 Article 78 Complaints and requests, group of symbols. 111 Chapter 2, Prisoner of war representatives, group of symbols. 111 Article 79 Election, Group of symbols. 111 Article 80 Duties. Group of symbols. 112 Article 81 Prerogatives. Group of symbols. 112 Chapter 3 Penal and Disciplinary Sanctions. Group of symbols. 113 I General Provisions. Group of symbols. 113 Article 82 Applicable Legislation. Group of symbols. 113 Article 83 Choice of Disciplinary or Judicial Proceedings. Group of symbols. 113 Article 84 Court. Group of symbols. 113 Article 85 Offences committed before capture. Group of symbols. 114 Article 86 Non bis in idem. 114 Article 87 Penalties. Group of symbols. 114 Article 88 Execution of penalties. Group of symbols. 114 10 Contents 2 Disciplinary sanctions. Group of symbols. 115 Article 89 General observations. I Forms of punishment. Group of symbols. 115 Article 92 Duration of punishments. Group of symbols. 115 Article 91 Escapes. I Successful escape. Group of symbols. 115 Article 92 2 Unsuccessful escape. Group of symbols. 116 Article 93 3 Connected offences. Group of symbols. 116 Article 94 IV Notification of recapture. Group of symbols. 116 Article 95 Procedure. I Confinement awaiting hearing. Group of symbols. 117 Article 96 2 Competent authorities and right of defence. Group of symbols. 117 Article 97 Execution of punishment. I Premises. Group of symbols. 117 Article 98 2 Essential safeguards. Group of symbols. 118 3 Judicial proceedings. Group of symbols. 118 Article 99 Essential rules. I General principles. Group of symbols. 118 Article 102 Death penalty. Group of symbols. 118 Article 101 3 Delay in execution of the death penalty. Group of symbols. 119 Article 102 Procedure. I Conditions for validity of sentence. Group of symbols. 119 Article 103 2 Confinement awaiting trial. Deduction from sentence. Treatment. 119 Article 104 3 Notification of proceedings. Group of symbols. 119 Article 105 IV Rights and means of defence. Group of symbols. 120 Article 106 V Appeals. Group of symbols. 121 Article 107 6 Notification of findings and sentence. Group of symbols. 121 Article 108 Execution of penalties. Penal regulations. Group of symbols. 122 Part IV Termination of captivity. Group of symbols. 122 Section I Direct repatriation and accommodation in neutral countries. Group of symbols. 122 Article 109 General observations. Group of symbols. 122 Article 110 Cases of repatriation and accommodation. Group of symbols. 123 Article 111 Internment in a neutral country. Group of symbols. 123 Article 112 Mixed medical commissions. Group of symbols. 124 Article 113 Prisoners entitled to examination by mixed medical commissions. Group of symbols. 124 Article 114 Prisoners meeting with accidents. Group of symbols. 124 Article 115 Prisoners serving a sentence. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 125 Article 116 Costs of repatriation. Group of symbols. 125 Article 117 Activity after repatriation. Group of symbols. 125 Section 2 Release and repatriation of prisoners of war at the close of hostilities. Group of symbols. 125 Article 118 Release and repatriation. Group of symbols. 125 Article 119 Details of procedure. Group of symbols. 126 The Geneva Conventions of 1949 11 Section 3 Death of prisoners of war. Group of symbols. 127 Article 120 Wills, Death certificates, burial, cremation. Group of symbols. 127. Article 121. Prisoners killed or injured in special circumstances. Group of symbols. 128. Part V. Information bureaus and relief societies for prisoners of war. Group of symbols. 128. Article 122. National bureaus. Group of symbols. 128. Article 123. Central agency. Group of symbols. 129. Article 124. Exemption from charges. Group of symbols. 130. Article 125. Relief societies and other organizations. Group of symbols. 130. Part 6. Execution of the Convention. Group of symbols. 131. Section I. General provisions. Group of symbols. 131. Article 126. Supervision. Group of symbols. 131. Article 127. Dissemination of the Convention. Group of symbols. 131. Article 128. Translations. Rules of application. Group of symbols. 131. Article 129. Penal sanctions. General observations. Group of symbols. 132. Article 132. Grave breaches. Group of symbols. 132. Article 131. 3. Responsibilities of the contracting parties. Group of symbols. 132. Article 132. Inquiry procedure. Group of symbols. 132. Section 2. Final provisions. Group of symbols. 133. Article 133. Languages. Group of symbols. 133. Article 134. Relation to the 1929 Convention. Group of symbols. 133. Article 135. Relation to the Hague Convention. Group of symbols. 133. Article 136. Signature. Group of symbols. 133. Article 137. Ratification. Group of symbols. 133. Article 138. Coming into force. Group of symbols. 134. Article 139. Accession. Group of symbols. 134. Article 140. Notification of accessions. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 134. Article 141. Immediate effect. Group of symbols. 134. Article 142. Denunciation. Group of symbols. 134. Article 143. Registration with the United Nations. Group of symbols. 135. Annex I. Model Agreement concerning direct repatriation and accommodation in neutral countries of wounded and sick prisoners of war. Group of symbols. 136. Annex II. Regulations concerning mixed medical commissions. Group of symbols. 140. Annex III. Regulations concerning collective relief. Group of symbols. 142. 12. Contents. Annex IV. Identity card, capture card, correspondence card and letter, notification of death, repatriation certificate. Group of symbols. 144. Annex V. Model regulations concerning payments sent by prisoners to their own country. Group of symbols. 150. The Geneva Conventions of 1949. 13. Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war of the 12th of August 1949. Part I. General provisions. Group of symbols. 151. Article 1. Respect for the Convention. Group of symbols. 151. Article 2. Application of the Convention. Group of symbols. 151. Article 3. Conflicts not of an international character. Group of symbols. 151. Article 4. Definition of protected persons. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 152. Article 5. Derogations. Group of symbols. 153. Article 6. Beginning and end of application. Group of symbols. 153. Article 7. Special agreements. Group of symbols. 153. Article 8. Non-renunciation of rights. Group of symbols. 154. Article 9. Protecting powers. Group of symbols. 154 Article 10 Activities of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Group of symbols. 154 Article 11 Substitutes for protecting powers. Group of symbols. 154 Article 12 Conciliation Procedure. Group of symbols. 155 Part 2 General Protection of Populations against certain consequences of war. Group of symbols. 156 Article 13 Field of Application of Part 2. Group of symbols. 156 Article 14 Hospital and Safety Zones and Localities. Group of symbols. 156 Article 15 Neutralized Zones. Group of symbols. 156 Article 16 Wounded and Sick. General Protection. Group of symbols. 157 Article 17-2. Evacuation. Group of symbols. 157 Article 18-3. Protection of hospitals. Group of symbols. 157 Article 19 IV. Discontinuance of protection of hospitals. Group of symbols. 157 Article 20 V. Hospital staff. Group of symbols. 158 Article 21-6. Land and sea transport. Group of symbols. 158 Article 22-7. Air transport. Group of symbols. 158 Article 23 Consignments of medical supplies, food and clothing. Group of symbols. 159 Article 24 Measures relating to child welfare. Group of symbols. 159 Article 25 Family news. Group of symbols. 160 Article 26 Dispersed families. Group of symbols. 160 Part 3 Status and Treatment of Protected Persons. Group of symbols. 161 Section I. Provisions common to the territories of the parties to the conflict and to occupied territories. Group of symbols. 161 Article 27 Treatment. General Observations. Group of symbols. 161 Article 28-2. Danger zones. Group of symbols. 161 Article 29-3. Responsibilities. Group of symbols. 161 14 Contents. Article 30 Application to Protecting Powers and Relief Organizations. Group of symbols. 161 Article 31 Prohibition of Coercion. Group of symbols. 162 Article 32 Prohibition of corporal punishment, torture, etc. Group of symbols. 162 Article 33 Individual responsibility, collective penalties, pillage, reprisals. Group of symbols. 162 Article 34 Hostages. Group of symbols. 162 Section 2 Aliens in the territory of a party to the conflict. 162 Article 35 Right to leave the territory. Group of symbols. 162 Article 36 Method of repatriation. Group of symbols. 163 Article 37 Persons in confinement. Group of symbols. 163 Article 38 Non-repatriated persons. General observations. Group of symbols. 163 Article 39-2. Means of existence. Group of symbols. 164 Article 43. Employment. Group of symbols. 164 Article 41 IV. Assigned residence. Internment. Group of symbols. 164 Article 42 V. Grounds for internment or assigned residence. Voluntary internment. Group of symbols. 165 Article 43-6. Procedure. Group of symbols. 165 Article 44-7. Refugees. Group of symbols. 165 Article 45-8. Transfer to another power. Group of symbols. 165 Article 46 Cancellation of restrictive measures. Group of symbols. 166 Section 3. Occupied territories. Group of symbols. 166 Article 47 Inviolability of rights. Group of symbols. 166 Article 48 Special cases of repatriation. Group of symbols. 167 Article 49 Deportations, transfers, evacuations. Group of symbols. 167 Article 50 Children. Group of symbols. 167 Article 51 Enlistment. Labor, group of symbols. 168 Article 52 Protection of workers, group of symbols. 169 Article 53 Prohibited destruction, group of symbols. 169 Article 54 Judges and public officials, group of symbols. 169 Article 55 Food and medical supplies for the population, group of symbols. 169 Article 56 Hygiene and public health, group of symbols. 170 Article 57 Requisition of hospitals, group of symbols. 170 Article 58 Spiritual assistance, group of symbols. 170 Article 59 Relief, a collective relief, group of symbols. 170 Article 62 Responsibilities of the occupying power, group of symbols. 171 Article 61(3) Distribution, group of symbols. 171 Article 62 IV Individual relief, group of symbols. 171 Article 63 National Red Cross and other relief societies, group of symbols. 171 Article 64 Penal legislation, I General observations, group of symbols. 172 Article 65(2) Publication, group of symbols. 172 Article 66(3) Competent courts, group of symbols. 172 Article 67 IV Applicable provisions, group of symbols. 172 Article 68 V Penalties. Death penalty, group of symbols. 173 The Geneva Conventions of 1949 15 Article 69(6) Deduction from sentence of period spent under arrest, group of symbols. 173 Article 77 Offences committed before occupation, group of symbols. 173 Article 71 Penal procedure, I General observations, group of symbols. 174 Article 72(2) Right of defence, group of symbols. 174 Article 73(3) Right of appeal, group of symbols. 175 Article 74 IV Assistance by the protecting power, group of symbols. 175 Article 75 V Death sentence, group of symbols. 175 Article 76 Treatment of detainees, group of symbols. 176 Article 77 Handing over of detainees at the close of occupation, group of symbols. 176 Article 78 Security measures. Internment and assigned residence. Right of appeal, group of symbols. 176 Section IV Regulations for the treatment of internees, group of symbols. 177 Chapter I General provisions, group of symbols. 177 Article 79 Cases of internment and applicable provisions, group of symbols. 177 Article 80 Civil capacity, group of symbols. 177 Article 81 Maintenance, group of symbols. 177 Article 82 Grouping of internees, group of symbols. 177 Chapter 2 Places of internment, group of symbols. 178 Article 83 Location of places of internment. Marking of camps, group of symbols. 178 Article 84 Separate internment, group of symbols. 178 Article 85 Accommodation, hygiene, group of symbols. 178 Article 86 Premises for religious services, group of symbols. 179 Article 87 Canteens, group of symbols. 179 Article 88 Air raid shelters. Protective measures, group of symbols. 179 Chapter 3 Food and clothing, group of symbols. 180 Article 89 Food, group of symbols. 180 Article 90 Clothing, group of symbols. 180 Chapter IV Hygiene and medical attention, group of symbols. 180 Article 91 Medical attention, group of symbols. 180 Article 92 Medical inspections, group of symbols. 181 Chapter V Religious, intellectual and physical activities, group of symbols. 181 Article 93 Religious duties, group of symbols. 181 Article 94 Recreation, study, Sports and games, group of symbols, 182. Article 95. Working conditions, group of symbols, 182. Article 96. Labor detachments, group of symbols, 183. Chapter 6. Personal property and financial resources, group of symbols, 183. Article 97. Valuables and personal effects, group of symbols, 183. Article 98. Financial resources and individual accounts, group of symbols, 184. 16. Contents, Chapter 7. Administration and discipline, group of symbols, 185. Article 99. Camp administration. Posting of the convention and of orders. 185. Article 100. General discipline, group of symbols, 185. Article 101. Complaints and petitions, group of symbols, 185. Article 102. Internee committees, election of members, group of symbols, 186. Article 103. 2. Duties, group of symbols, 186. Article 104. 3. Prerogatives, group of symbols, 186. Chapter 8. Relations with the exterior, group of symbols, 187. Article 105. Notification of measures taken, group of symbols, 187. Article 106. Internment card, group of symbols, 187. Article 107. Correspondence, group of symbols, 187. Article 108. Relief shipments, general principles, group of symbols, 188. Article 109. 2. Collective relief, group of symbols, 188. Article 110. 3. Exemption from postal and transport charges, group of symbols, 188. Article 111. Special means of transport, group of symbols, 189. Article 112. Censorship and examination, group of symbols, 190. Article 113. Execution and transmission of legal documents, group of symbols, 190. Article 140. Management of property, group of symbols, 190. Article 115. Facilities for preparation and conduct of cases, group of symbols, 190. Article 116. Visits, group of symbols, 191. Chapter 9. Penal and disciplinary sanctions, group of symbols, 191. Article 117. General provisions. Applicable legislation, group of symbols, 191. Article 118. Penalties, group of symbols, 191. Article 119. Disciplinary punishments, group of symbols, 192. Article 120. Escapes, group of symbols, 192. Article 121. Connected offences, group of symbols, 192. Article 122. Investigations. Confinement awaiting hearing, group of symbols, 193. Article 123. Competent authorities. Procedure, group of symbols, 193. Article 124. Premises for disciplinary punishments, group of symbols, 193. Article 125. Essential safeguards, group of symbols, 194. Article 126. Provisions applicable to judicial proceedings, group of symbols, 194. Chapter X. Transfers of internees, group of symbols, 194. Article 127. Conditions, group of symbols, 194. Article 128. Method, group of symbols, 195. Chapter 11. Deaths, group of symbols, 195. Article 129. Wills. Death certificates, group of symbols, 195. Article 130. Burial. Cremation, group of symbols, 196. Article 131. Internees killed or injured in special circumstances, group of symbols, 196. The Geneva Conventions of 1949. 17. Chapter 12. Release, repatriation and accommodation in neutral countries. Group of symbols. 197 Article 132 during hostilities or occupation. Group of symbols. 197 Article 133 after the close of hostilities. Group of symbols. 197 Article 134 repatriation and return to last place of residence. Group of symbols. 197 Article 135 costs. Group of symbols. 197 Section V. Information Bureaus and Central Agency. Group of symbols. 198 Article 136 National Bureaus. Group of symbols. 198 Article 137 Transmission of Information. Group of symbols. 198 Article 138 Particulars Required. Group of symbols. 199 Article 139 Forwarding of Personal Valuables. Group of symbols. 199 Article 140 Central Agency. Group of symbols. 199 Article 141 Exemption from charges. Group of symbols. 200 Part IV Execution of the Convention. Group of symbols. 200 Section I. General Provisions. Group of symbols. 200 Article 142 Relief Societies and Other Organizations. Group of symbols. 200 Article 143 Supervision. Group of symbols. 201 Article 144 Dissemination of the Convention. Group of symbols. 201 Article 145 Translations. Rules of Application. Group of symbols. 201 Article 146 Penal Sanctions. I. General Observations. Group of symbols. 201 Article 147 2. Grave Breaches. Group of symbols. 202 Article 148 3. Responsibilities of the contracting parties. Group of symbols. 202 Article 149 Inquiry Procedure. Group of symbols. 202 Section 2. Final Provisions. Group of symbols. 203 Article 150 Languages. Group of symbols. 203 Article 151 Signature. Group of symbols. 203 Article 152 Ratification. Group of symbols. 203 Article 153 Coming into Force. Group of symbols. 203 Article 154 Relation with the Hague Conventions. Group of symbols. 203 Article 155 Accession. Group of symbols. 203 Article 156 Notification of Accessions. Group of symbols. Group of symbols. 204 Article 157 Immediate Effect. Group of symbols. 204 Article 158 Denunciation. Group of symbols. 204 Article 159 Registration with the United Nations. Group of symbols. 205 18 Contents Annex I Draft Agreement relating to hospital and safety zones and localities. Group of symbols. 206 Annex 2 Draft Regulations concerning collective relief. Group of symbols. 209 Annex 3 Internment Card, Letter, Correspondence Card. Group of symbols. 211 The Geneva Conventions of 1949. 19 Preliminary Remarks. The International Committee of the Red Cross has, from the outset, been the sponsor of the Geneva Convention for the Protection of Wounded Military Personnel, and of the humanitarian conventions which supplement it. Each of these fundamental international agreements is inspired by respect for human personality and dignity. Together, they establish the principle of disinterested aid to all victims of war without discrimination, to all those who, whether through wounds, capture or shipwreck, are no longer enemies but merely suffering and defenseless human beings. Throughout the years, the International Committee has labored unremittingly for the greater protection in international law of the individual against the hardships of war. It successively elaborated the humanitarian conventions and adapted them to current needs, or instituted new ones. In the period between the two world wars, the Committee's main achievement lay in the establishment of a number of draft conventions, chief among which was the Convention on the Treatment of Prisoners of War. This was signed in the summer of 1929 and, during the last conflict, protected millions of captives. Other new or revised draft conventions were to have been submitted to a diplomatic conference which the Swiss Federal Council planned to convene early in 1940. Hostilities, unfortunately, intervened. The year 1945 marked the close of a war waged on an unprecedented scale. The task had to be faced of developing and adapting the humanitarian elements of international law in the light of the experience gained. The International Committee's proposals met with the early approval of governments and national Red Cross societies, and it immediately set to work. 3 former conventions had to be revised: the Geneva Convention of 1929 for the relief of the wounded and sick in armies in the field, the XTH Hague Convention of 1907 for the adaptation to maritime warfare of the principles of the Geneva Convention, and the 1929 Convention on the Treatment of Prisoners of War. Furthermore, there was urgent need for a convention for the protection of civilians, the absence of which had, during the world conflict, led to such grievous consequences. The Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August 1949 20 preliminary remarks. The International Committee worked on the lines it had followed after the 1914-1918 war. First, it collected the fullest possible preliminary information on those aspects of international law that required confirmation, enlargement, or amendment. Then, with the help of experts from various countries, it prepared the revised and new drafts which were submitted, first, to an International Red Cross conference, and then to a diplomatic conference empowered to give these treaties final validity. The first meeting of experts was held in October 1945 and comprised the neutral members of the mixed medical commissions which, during the conflict, had visited wounded or sick prisoners of war, to decide about their repatriation. The second meeting was the Preliminary Conference of National Red Cross Societies for the study of the conventions and of various problems relative to the Red Cross, which the International Committee convened at Geneva in July and August 1946, and before which the first drafts were laid. Having gathered the suggestions of Red Cross agencies on points which were within their particular fields, the committee made a close study during the months that followed, and collected very full data on all matters dealt with in the proposed conventions. Consultations included one, in March 1947, with representatives of the religious and secular bodies which had collaborated with the committee in giving spiritual and intellectual aid to victims of the war. From April the 14th to 26, 1947, the Conference of Government Experts for the Study of Conventions for the Protection of War Victims was held in Geneva. This was attended by 70 representatives of 15 governments which had held large numbers of prisoners and civilian internees during the war, and were therefore particularly experienced in the matters under discussion. Combining the committee's proposals, the suggestions made by the Red Cross societies, and drafts prepared by several governments, the conference agreed to the new texts proposed and to the first draft of a convention for the protection of civilian persons in time of war. The International Committee also sought the advice of several governments which were not represented at the April conference. Some sent experts to Geneva in June 1947. The drafts in preparation were also submitted by the committee to a special commission of National Red Cross societies, which met at Geneva in September of the same year. After careful editing early in the year, the draft conventions were sent by the committee, in May 1938, to all governments and National Red Cross societies, in preparation for the XVIth International Red Cross Conference. This conference sat in Stockholm from August the 20th to 31, 1948. The representatives of 50 governments and 52 National Red Cross societies were present. With some amendments, the drafts were adopted. The Geneva Conventions of 1949-21, after passing through the many preparatory stages briefly described, these texts were eventually taken as the sole working documents of the Diplomatic Conference of Geneva. Out of these grew the 1949 Geneva Conventions. the Diplomatic Conference for the Establishment of International Conventions for the Protection of Victims of War, convened by the Swiss Federal Council, as trustee of the Geneva Conventions, was held in Geneva from April the 21st to August the 12th, 1949. Of the 63 governments represented at the conference, 59 had sent plenipotentiaries, 4 sent observers only. Representatives of the International Committee were invited to participate in the capacity of experts. After 4 months of continuous debate, the conference established the following 4 conventions, which are given below. Geneva Convention for the Amelioration of the Condition of the Wounded and Sick in Armed Forces in the Field, of August the 12th, 1949. 2. Geneva Convention for the Amelioration of the Condition of Wounded, Sick and Shipwrecked Members of Armed Forces at Sea, of August the 12th, 1949. 3. Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, of August the 12th, 1949. IV. Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war, of August the 12th, 1949. The conference at once divided into 4 committees. The first, for the revision of Conventions I and II. The second, for the revision of Convention 3, Prisoners of War. The third, to establish the new convention relative to the protection of civilian persons. And lastly, the Joint Committee, to deal with provisions common to the 4 conventions. Coordination and drafting committees met towards the end of the conference, to harmonize the 4 texts. When necessary, the committees formed working parties. At the closing meeting, delegations of the following states signed the final act: Afghanistan, Albania, Argentina, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, Burma, Canada, Chile, China, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, Ecuador, Egypt, Ethiopia, Finland, France, Greece, Guatemala, the Holy See, Hungary, India, Iran, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Yugoslavia, Lebanon, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Mexico, Monaco, Netherlands, New Zealand, Nicaragua, Norway, Pakistan, Peru, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Siam, Soviet Socialist Republic of Belarusia, Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine, Spain, Sweden, Syria, Turkey, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, United Kingdom, United States of America, Uruguay, Switzerland. 22 preliminary remarks. 17 delegations also signed the 4 conventions. 44 other states had signed when the agreed 6 months period expired on February the 12th, 1950. According to their provisions, the new Geneva Conventions come into force 6 months after the deposit of at least 2 instruments of ratification. Thereafter, they come into force for each contracting party 6 months after it ratifies. Provisions common to the 4 conventions. The Geneva Diplomatic Conference made an innovation in grouping together and amplifying the common provisions, up to then dispersed and rudimentary. Now practically identical in the 4 conventions, they may be considered under 3 headings. General provisions. The general provisions are given in a dozen articles of great importance at the beginning of each convention, laying down the mode of application. They deal with respect for the conventions and their application in international conflict, enemy occupation or civil war. They are followed by provisions about the duration of application, special agreements which contracting parties may conclude, the inalienability of the right of protected persons, the duties of protecting powers or their substitutes, the activities of the International Committee of the Red Cross, and conciliation procedure between the contracting parties. Repression of breaches of the conventions. Articles 49 to 52 of the first convention, 50 to 53 of the second, 129 to 131 of the third, and 146 to 149 of the fourth. The Stockholm Conference had expressed the view that the provisions it had approved were still inadequate, and had requested the International Committee to continue its study of this important question. After consulting lawyers of international repute, the committee prepared suggestions which appeared in the volume Remarks and Proposals, submitted for consideration. The conference used these suggestions as a basis for its deliberations. The first of the articles imposes penal sanctions for breaches of the Convention, in particular for grave breaches, as defined in the succeeding article. These texts will doubtless be an important contribution towards defining war crimes in international law. The term is frequently used and seen in print, but still awaits an acceptable legal definition. The Geneva Conventions of 1949-23 final provisions. The final provisions appear at the end of each convention and define the procedure for the signature, ratification and entry into force of the conventions, and for accession to them. First Geneva Convention, Wounded and Sick. The traditional Geneva Convention, brought into being by the newly created International Committee of the Red Cross in 1864, is the source of the Geneva Conventions, which are now universally accepted. The original convention gave the impetus to the Red Cross movement throughout the world. It likewise inspired the impulsion in international law towards an increasing regulation and, eventually, the restriction and final prohibition of war itself. This first international treaty, the fundamental principles of which have remained unshaken, was nevertheless marked by omissions and imperfections, and as early as 4 years after signature, a conference was convened to discuss its revision. On October 20, 1868, the conference proposed a number of additional articles, providing in particular for the extension of the convention to maritime warfare, but they were never ratified. A recommendation by the First Hague Conference in 1899 raised the question of revision again. The 1906 Diplomatic Conference established a revised text which recast and considerably developed the 1864 text. After the First World War, it was clear that the Geneva Conventions needed adapting to the conditions of modern warfare. During the 1929 Diplomatic Conference at Geneva, the text was once more revised, although to a lesser extent than on the first occasion. In 1937, after renewed discussion by a commission of international experts called by the International Committee, another revised text was established. The draft, after submission to the XVIIth International Red Cross Conference, London, I-938, was placed on the agenda of the diplomatic conference planned for 1940 but postponed by the Second World War. We have shown how the 1937 draft was shaped by the experience of the 6 momentous war years. The help of the National Red Cross Societies, closely involved historically in the application and development of the convention, was particularly valuable. The text of the first convention, as revised by the 1949 conference, follows traditional lines and the fundamental principles that governed former versions. Wounded or sick, and therefore defenseless, combatants shall be respected. 24 preliminary remarks and cared for, whatever their nationality. Personnel attending them, the buildings in which they shelter and the equipment used for their benefit, shall be protected. A red cross on a white ground shall be the emblem of this immunity. As will be seen later, the greatest divergence arises from the very conditions of modern warfare, which made it necessary to restrict the privileges of medical personnel and equipment in enemy hands. On the other hand, almost all articles have been made more precise. The general provisions are followed by Chapter 2, dealing with the wounded and sick. Article 13, drawn from the 1929 Prisoners of War Convention, enumerates the categories of persons put on the same footing as members of the armed forces, and hence entitled to protection under the convention. Whereas the 1949 text demanded respect and protection only for the wounded, Article 12, which is new, gives a list of prohibited acts, attempts upon life, torture, willful abandonment and so on. The information to be given about wounded captives, and the duties to the dead have been defined, Art. 16 and 17. A new provision, Art. 18. Guarantees to the inhabitants and to relief societies the right of assisting the wounded and sick. Chapter 3. Medical units and establishments has not undergone alteration, except for the introduction of Article 23, creation of safety zones and localities. Chapter IV. Medical personnel and chaplains has been greatly modified. Hitherto, such personnel falling into enemy hands had to be immediately repatriated. The 1949 Convention provides that they may, in certain circumstances, be retained to care for prisoners of war. Their special status and the conditions for the repatriation of those not required, Art. 30-32, have been carefully defined, Art. 28, thus filling a serious gap. Chapter V. Medical equipment has been substantially altered to take changes regarding personnel into account. Equipment need no longer be handed back to the belligerent to whom it belongs. In Chapter 6 similar provision is made for transport vehicles, Art. 35. It should be noted that medical aircraft are now authorized, in certain circumstances, to fly over neutral countries, Art. 37. Chapter 7. Distinctive emblem marks no change in principle. Nevertheless Article 44, the wording of which left so much to be desired in the 1929 text, is now stated in logical and balanced terms. While the protective emblem is subject to strict safeguards, the purely indicatory emblem may be widely used by Red Cross societies. Chapter 8. Application of the Convention calls for no comment. The Geneva Conventions of 1949-25 reference has already been made to Chapter 9, Repression of Abuses and Infractions, and to the final provisions. Article 53, which is peculiar to the first convention, is intended to prevent abuse of the distinctive emblem. Second Geneva Convention, Maritime. The 1868 Diplomatic Conference, at Geneva, formulated the first provisions for the adaptation to maritime warfare of the principles of the Geneva Convention. This draft was not ratified, but later became the Hague Convention of 1899, and afterwards the Hague Convention of 1907, which was ratified by 47 states and still remains in force. Nevertheless, evolution in the methods of warfare and the fact that the first Geneva Convention was revised in 1929, made a recasting of the Hague Convention essential. After preliminary study, the International Committee, with the help of a conference of naval experts, drafted in 1937 a revised convention, which was placed on the agenda of the diplomatic conference scheduled for 1940. This draft, extended after 1945 in the light of war experience, was used as a basis by the diplomatic conference in 1949. The Maritime Convention, as it is called, is an extension of the first convention, Wounded and Sick, the terms of which it applies to maritime warfare. It is therefore natural that it should be included among the Geneva Conventions, out of which it originally developed. As the general plan of this Second Geneva Convention covers the same field and protects the same categories of persons as the first, no comment is necessary on its basic principles. It contains, however, no less than 63 articles, whereas the 1907 version had only 28. This is because the 1949 text, similar to the 1937 draft, adapts the provision of the Land Convention and closely follows them. It has thus become a complete and independent convention, whereas the 1907 Hague text was chiefly concerned to adapt humanitarian provisions to naval warfare. Following the general provisions common to the four conventions, Chapter 2 protects the shipwrecked in addition to the wounded and sick. Members of the Merchant Navy are protected under the terms of Article 13, insofar as they are not entitled to more favorable treatment under other provisions in international law. The qualification, new in treaty law, is in conformity with ordinary practice. 26 Preliminary Remarks. Chapter 3, obviously applicable only to maritime warfare, deals with hospital ships and other relief craft. Chapter IV. At sea, medical personnel, on account of prevailing conditions, are given wider protection than on land. In particular, the medical personnel and crew, vital to the hospital ships as such, may not be captured or retained. The personnel of other ships, while they may in some cases be retained, must be put ashore as soon as possible and will then come under the First Convention. Chapter V. Medical Transports has its parallel in the First Convention, but the Maritime Convention makes no special provision for the equipment, which is, in a sense, part and parcel of the vessel itself. There were no fighting aircraft in 1907. Hence the addition, in Chapter 6, distinctive emblem, of provisions for the more efficient marking of hospital ships, as a safeguard against air attack. Chapters 7, Execution of the Convention, and 8, Repression of Abuses and Infractions, as well as the final provisions, call for no special comment. Third Geneva Convention, Prisoners of War. The Third Convention contains 143 articles, besides the annexes. The corresponding 1929 Convention had 97 articles, and the chapter on prisoners of war in the Hague Convention, only 17. This extension is no doubt due, in part, to the fact that, in modern warfare, prisoners are held in very large numbers, but it also interprets the desire of the 1949 Conference, representing all nations, to submit all aspects of captivity to humane regulation by international law. The aspiration is not new. The 19th century saw new concepts of natural law and a new humanitarian movement, in particular the ideas of Henry Dunant, who applied himself to the prisoner of war problem after the wounded and sick had been provided for. The civilized world finally accepted the principle that the prisoner of war is not a criminal, but merely an enemy no longer able to bear arms, who should be liberated at the close of hostilities, and be respected and humanely treated while in captivity. Far-seeing and broad-minded legal and diplomatic action has since translated concept into practice, through a series of codifications accepted as binding by states, and successively extended or amplified when experience showed them to be inadequate. The Brussels Draft of 1874, the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907, the special agreements made between belligerents in Bern in 1917 and 1918, and the Geneva Conventions of 1929, which devote all or part of their clauses to prisoners of war, represent the principal stages of this evolution. The Geneva Conventions of 1949-27, wherever it was applied, the 1929 Prisoners of War Convention effectively helped to protect the millions of men who relied upon it during the last conflict. Nevertheless, it was quite evident, both to those who benefited and to those by whom it was applied, that the convention required revision on many points. There have been changes in the methods and the consequences of war, and even in the living conditions of peoples. It was necessary to broaden the categories of persons entitled to prisoner of war status, so that such status is in fact granted to members of forces which capitulate, and that prisoners may not be arbitrarily deprived of it, at any time. A more precise definition of the conditions of captivity was also required, which would take into account the importance assumed by prisoner of war labor, the relief they receive, and the judicial proceedings instituted against them. The principle of the immediate liberation of prisoners on the close of hostilities had to be reaffirmed.